Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Make Money Your Honey podcast. I have such a treat today. I know I say that all the time, but this episode is literally like a bucket list dream come true. I interviewed one of my financial sheroes, Barbara Huson, formerly known as Barbara Stanny. Now, many of you may have heard of her. She's written amazing books like Prince Charming Isn't Coming, Secrets of Six-Figure Women, and the book that completely changed my life and I recommend to clients all the time, Overcoming Underearning. So let's get into this bio. Let's do a quick recap of what we talk about in this episode. It is juicy, y'all. It is really, really juicy. And then we're going to dive right in. So Barbara Huson, previously known as Barbara Stanny, is the leading authority on women, wealth, and power. As a best-selling author, financial therapist, teacher, and wealth coach, Barbara has helped millions take charge of their finances and their lives. Barbara's background in business, her years as a journalist, her master's degree in counseling psychology, her extensive research, and her personal experience with money give her a unique perspective and makes her the foremost expert on empowering women to live up to their financial and personal potential. Barbara Huson has been featured on Good Morning America, The View, Extra, The O'Reilly Report, and many times on CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News, PBS, and NPR, as well as the New York Times and USA Today. Barbara is the author of 7 books: Prince Charming Isn't Coming, How Women Get Smart About Money, Secrets of Six-Figure Women, Surprising Strategies to Up Your Earnings and Change Your Life, Overcoming Underearning, A 5-Step Plan to a Richer Life, Finding a Financial Advisor You Can Trust, A Guide for Investors and Those Who Want to Be, Breaking Through, Getting Past the Stuck Points in Your Life, Sacred Success, A Course in Financial Miracles, and her latest book, Rewire for Wealth, 3 steps any woman can take to program her brain for financial success. You can learn more about her at barbara-huson.com. So let me talk about, first of all, in this episode, you're going to hear me fangirling like half the time. I'm letting y'all know now. I get a little misty-eyed, I get a little emotional, because Barbara Huson changed my life. I have read Secrets of Six-Figure Women, I've read Overcoming Underearning, I've read Sacred Success, most recently read her latest book, Rewire for Wealth, and Overcoming Underearning. I had to read that book 3 times. It completely changed the trajectory of my life. One of the reasons I go so hard on, hey women, you need to know the skill sets of earning money. You need to understand sales. You need to understand business. You need to understand these things is a big reason because of it. A big reason I go so hard is because of overcoming under-earning, which helped me realize personally that I was an under-earner. I was one of these people who would overwork, not make enough money. The book helped me recognize that. The book helped me get out of it too, because y'all know that is not an issue anymore. I do call myself a recovering under-earner, but I'm pretty good in that department now. So I expressed my gratitude to her and just totally fangirled, just FYI, so you all know. And we go into some really deep topics in this podcast. You know, we go into her new book, Rewire for Wealth. We go into childhood trauma and how childhood trauma affects our financial decisions. I share some childhood trauma of mine that I recently learned about and recently found out about, and I share how that was affecting me financially and how I was able to break through that. We also talk about why women struggle, statistically, why women struggle with this notion of building wealth, why we've been cultured into this, conditioned into it. We talk about, she shares a really great strategies for getting over your fear of finances, and she also shares some really great strategies for learning to actually rewire your brain using neuroscience, right? So you could have a wealthier life. And this isn't one of those like super woo-woo, like ethereal, like just visualize it and it will come to, y'all know I don't play that, right? This is data, neuroscience, backed by facts, right? And that's one of the reasons why we needed to have this conversation and why this book is so different from a lot of what is perpetuated out there in the traditional personal finance space, first of all, where they don't talk about this really at all, right? And then, you know, in the more mindset spaces, it's still very ethereal, not really super grounded. So we talk about why she decided to really talk about neuroscience in this book. And it's generally just an amazing interview. Barbara shares such a wealth of knowledge. And then, like I said, you're going to hear me fangirling probably more than once. So with that being said, let's get into this interview so we can get to the good stuff. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Make Money Your Honey podcast. I am thrilled to have Barbara Huson with us today, formerly known as Barbara Stanny. A lot of people in our audience may know you as Barbara Stanny from back in the day. You've taken on your husband's name now, so it's Barbara Huson. And I already told her before we got on that I might fangirl a little bit. So Barbara, overcoming under earning absolutely changed my life when I was a financial writer. So before getting into the questions, I just wanted to just express my extreme gratitude because that book completely changed the trajectory of my life. Look, I'm already starting to get emotional.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I know this is your podcast, but I want to ask you, how did it change your life? What exactly?
Oh my God. I think it helped me recognize that I was an under earner. I think that was a part of it. You know, I was a financial writer too. I had jobs. I never made more than like 22 grand a year at jobs I was at. And I wanted so bad to be like one of those 6-figure earner women. I read Secrets of 6-Figure Women as well. but that one didn't quite make sense to me. And then when I read Overcoming Under Earning, I was like, oh my God, that's me. Like, this is me. I saw myself in the book. You talk a lot about boundaries. You talk a lot about garnering respect. And I have never, ever forgotten that. I've read the book 3 times. I think the last time was a few years ago, but even now, I'm kind of in the stage where you mentioned in your new book, Rewire for Wealth, where you mentioned you were like at 6 figures, you wanted to go bigger. That's where I'm at now. And I still remember the things that I learned in Overcoming Under Earning. And every time, whether it's one of our clients or a woman in one of our programs or at a networking event or just a random woman I meet on the street and I notice that she's really struggling with that, I'm always like, you have to go read this book. It will change your life. You will probably have to read it more than once. I had to read it 3 times before it really settled in, right? But it will absolutely change the trajectory of your life. And I'm sure, like me, there's millions of others.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to start with that because I'm having a bucket list moment right now interviewing you for my podcast. Right.
I'm very flattered. I really am, because as a writer, we write books, but I never know who reads them or how it impacts. So this is a moment for me too. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, let's get into your new book called Rewire for Wealth, which I gobbled up over a weekend. But before getting into the new book, I want to give the audience some context. Who is Barbara Huson and how did she get here, for maybe the 3 people in my audience who don't know who you are?
Well, I never, ever, ever expected to be a financial writer, to be writing about money. Never. So I grew up in a wealthy family, and the only advice my father ever gave me about money was don't worry, which I loved that advice. And I married a man who was a stockbroker, but I found out very early in my marriage that he was a compulsive gambler. And the insane part is that I continued to let him manage the money. For the 15 years we were married, he did everything. And I just signed whatever he told me to sign. And even though I found out he was losing my money, my inheritance, and finally after 15 years, got a divorce, and I decided I don't want to deal with money. It's just not my thing. Well, the universe had other plans for me, and I got tax bills for more than $1 million. I for back taxes my ex didn't pay, for illegal deals he got us in. I did not have anywhere close to $1 million. My ex had left the country, and my father wouldn't lend me the money. And that's when I knew I had to get smart. I had 3 daughters. I was not going to raise those girls on the street. So I read the books and I went to the classes. I did all the things they told you to do, and my eyes would glaze over and my brain would fog up, and I just couldn't get it. And then, but I really believe that when you make a commitment, like a down to your toes commitment, like I'm going to get this no matter what, the universe revolves to help you reach your goal. And I was a journalist writing for the San Francisco Business Times, and I was hired for a freelance project to interview women who were smart with money. And those interviews changed my life. I not only got smart about money, but I wrote my first book, Prince Charming Isn't Coming, How Women Get Smart About Money. And now, 7 books later, here you and I are talking about finances.
It's funny how that happens. I've noticed, because I was a financial writer too in my first business, and I also never thought I was going to be a financial writer. I've never met a financial writer who thought they were going to be a financial writer. Usually something happened that like put us in that direction. So, go ahead.
No, go on.
Oh, so you talk a lot about women specifically and women building wealth. So what do you think stops women from building wealth?
Oh, so many reasons, and we all have our own, but part of it's, I think, evolutionary. I mean, we were, from the beginning of time, we were the ones, the men were the hunter-gatherers. They went out and they found the pig, and then we cooked the bacon. So that's part of it. But a part of it is so much of the way we've been enculturated. And we've come to believe that we aren't good with money. We've come to believe that this is overwhelming and mystifying. And there's a whole industry out there that will confirm that. But my message is, it's not that tough. It's really quite simple. And it doesn't take a lot of time to get smart, and it's never, ever, ever too late to start.
So I love that you say that. One of the things I've noticed with our clients, you're right, it's like enculturated. And I've also noticed that we women are also enculturated to not trust ourselves. So in general, right? So that when it comes to financial decisions, I find that even still to this day, there's a lot of, let me go ask my husband, let me go ask somebody else, let me go ask 15 other people before the woman herself is like, hey, I'm making this decision for me. If anybody in the audience is recognizing themselves as that, I remember I had a client who had a joke about it. She'd be like, I'd have post-it 1 and I would have post-it 2, right? And then I would just be stuck in indecision between post-it 1 and post-it 2 when it came to her finances and her business. For anybody who might be recognizing themselves in what you just described or what we just talked about, what advice do you have for them to start coming out of it? Because it is an entire industry basically that will tell women like, hey, you're not really that great at this. Like, I mean, I've heard stories from people in our audience who like, we'll go talk to the financial planner, and instead of talking to us, they'll be like, where's your husband?
Yeah, so and part of it is, I think, ignorance breeds fear. The more we understand and know about money, the more confident we will become. The more we're apt to make decisions by ourselves. And I mean, no one's going to do us for it. We don't have to do it alone. There's nothing wrong with getting people's opinion. But the important thing is to do that from an informed place, to make financial decisions from a place of knowledge, not fear, ignorance, or habit. And so I'm going to give you 3 steps. This is what I did. Because getting smart or smarter about money, because it never ends, it doesn't need to take a lot of time. It's small steps consistently taken. You do these 3 steps for, say, 2 or 3 months, and you will be amazed at the difference in how you feel. So every day, read something about money, even if it's just for a minute or two. Even if you're take the newspaper, open it to the business section and peruse the headlines. Or you're standing in line at the market, you pick up Money magazine instead of People and leaf through it. Or before you go to bed at night, you take a finance book, preferably one of mine, but you take a finance book and you read a paragraph, because it's familiarizing ourselves with the jargon or the current trends. I remember when I was interviewing women for my first book, Prince Charming Isn't Coming, these were all smart women. And so many of them subscribed to the Wall Street Journal. So I subscribed to the Wall Street Journal. Well, that sucker came every day and I couldn't understand what it said. So I took what was then section C, the finance section, and I put it on the kitchen counter and I just passed by it. And I figured by osmosis, I picked something up. Well, I have to tell you, to this day, I'll still do that. I'll still do that. If I don't have time to read it, I'll put it on the kitchen counter and just pass by it. So every day, read something about money just for a minute or two. Every week, have a conversation about money, preferably with someone that knows more than you. I think it is our secrecy and silence that keeps us stuck. And we don't have to ask anybody necessarily how much they make, but we can say, how did you get smart? What mistakes did you make? What's the best advice you ever got? What books did you read? What would you suggest for me? Questions like that. And that's what I did. I just picked people's brain. Anybody who knew anything, I'd say, God, I'd love to talk to you. Can we go out for coffee? We have a phone call? And I'd ask them questions, and they were 99% of them were really willing and eager to talk. So every day read, every week talk, and every month automatically have money transferred from your checking account or your payroll check into a savings account. It doesn't have to be much. $10, $20 a month is fine, because it's the habit of savings, and small amounts consistently saved add up quickly. So every day read, every week talk, and every month save. Do that for 3 months and you will be amazed.
I remember reading that in one of your books when I was still trying to figure out my own personal finances back in the day. And one of the things I started doing instead of the reading, because for some reason my eyes were still glazing over, but the way I got around that was I would listen to financial podcasts while I was making breakfast. And I swear I got smarter. Like I somehow got smarter.
So that's so good. So they didn't have podcasts in my day.
Yeah.
But yes,
Fair
podcasts
enough.
are a great way to learn. And there's so many good ones.
There are a lot of really good ones. We've had Farnoosh Charabi on the show. I would recommend going to go listen to Farnoosh's, everybody, for sure. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the books that you wrote that actually absolutely changed my life was Overcoming Underearning. It was really eye-opening for me. I realized I was an underearner, and I realized I didn't have a money management problem per se. Like I had gotten that part down by the time I found Overcoming Underearning. I had an earning problem. I just could not figure out how to make more money. So what I've noticed is that a lot of the women that we speak to are stuck in that phase of like, they can make a dollar go around a block 3 times, right? But when it comes to making the money, there seems to be issues there. And I remember you talking specifically, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you talked a lot about boundaries, and you talked a lot about respect in that book. So can you talk a little bit more about why those things matter so much when it comes to earning money?
So I'm going to answer that a little different way. Basically, there's 3 reasons why I'm convinced that women aren't earning what they deserve and desire and what they're worth. And one of them, and then I will get to your question about boundaries and respect, because this is all into it. So the first is that we don't value ourselves. We don't respect what we bring to the table. And therefore we give away our knowledge, our experience, our time for free or bargain prices, because we don't believe we're worth more. And from that way of thinking, The second reason is that we women are notoriously codependent. We put everybody else's needs before our own, and not just our family or our friends, but hey, perfect strangers. And this may sound noble, but it always leads to resentment and anger and often pain and illness. But every time we think of putting ourselves first, which is where the boundaries come in, of being really setting strong boundaries and nurturing ourselves and serving ourselves. What happens, and this is the number one reason why so many women are under earners, is we don't want to be uncomfortable. We do, because we go to put ourselves first, we feel guilty. We go to do something we're not used to doing, we're scared. The number one requirement to go to the next level in earnings or anything in life is the willingness to be uncomfortable, the willingness to do what you don't think you can do. I ask under earners, when's the last time you did something you thought you couldn't do or were too scared to do? And they'll scratch their heads and try to think. And I ask high earners and they'll laugh and they'll say, all the time. It's a way of life. I created what I call the high earners slogan. Anytime an opportunity came their way, they would say, if it wasn't illegal or immoral, I just say yes.
I love
So
that.
it's important to value yourself, respect yourself, put strong boundaries on taking care of yourself. And most important of all, do what you fear, because that's how you succeed.
Yeah, I agree. When you were talking about that, I was like, I'm scared right now talking to Barbara Huson. I'm doing something uncomfortable right now talking to one of my sheroes, but here I am.
That's
And it's
adorable.
true. I've noticed I've noticed high earners do that though. Like they are constantly uncomfortable and constantly in uncomfortable situations. Constant, and then you look back and then you're like, oh, that doesn't really scare me anymore. And then you go for the next uncomfortable thing. And that's how you grow. So you actually talk a lot about self-worth a lot in your new book. So let's get to your new book, Rewire for Wealth. And I have to be honest with you, when I saw it, like I've been obsessed with money for like 12 years now. So I thought I had done a lot of work on my mindset and rewiring my brain. I've worked with like top money mindset experts in the state. So like I thought I had done the work. I thought I was going to breeze through this book. I was wrong. I was very wrong, because what you ended up doing in this book is you went really deep into the neuroscience of how to actually rewire your brain for wealth. So it wasn't platitudes like, oh, just change your thoughts. You really went into the science of it. So why did you decide to do that in this book? Why is it so important to know this aspect of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of came, I don't know. It happened about right when my sixth book came out, Sacred Success. I forget what year it was, but anyway, I had a great year. I was really successful. Things were really great. And one day I started feeling this feeling like losing interest in my work. And I started feeling like something was missing, or I don't know. And it went on and on and on. And I just kind of started backing off my work, stopped seeing clients, stopped speaking, just kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And I remember thinking, something doesn't feel right. Something feels like it's missing. And so I started praying, okay, show me, show me. Maybe I'm done working, but I don't feel like it. And one day I was looking at my email and there was an article about neuroscience. And I read this article. I knew nothing about neuroscience, but I swear to God, Amanda, I think a part of my brain lit up like a Christmas tree. And I was going, this is it. This is the missing piece. And so I spent about 4 or 5 years studying neuroscience and seeing how I could integrate it into the process I was using with women. Because I really, the more I learned, the more I knew it could expedite the learning process and really, really weaken, if not destroy their fears and their resistance. And I was right.
So speaking of resistance, I actually really loved this part of the book because as I shoot for a seven-figure business right now, I feel resistance a lot. all the time, probably every other week, if I'm being honest. From hiring and managing people to managing the money to making different kinds of financial decisions to, even getting cool guests on my podcast, I will feel resistance about it. And I feel like I deal with resistance all the time. So I was happy to hear in your book that resistance is actually a good thing. And our clients ask us about resistance all the time. So can you explain to the audience why resistance is actually a good sign?
Yeah, because if you weren't going to the next level, if you weren't doing something outside your comfort zone, you wouldn't feel resistant. Resistance is a sign you're changing. It is normal, it is natural, it always happens, because every time you go to do something different, every time you go to deviate from the norm, there's a part of yourself that will say, no, don't do that. That's scary. That's dangerous. Don't do that. So wait, I just lost my train of thought. What was the question?
You were explaining why resistance is
Oh,
actually a good thing.
yeah. So resistance, I define resistance as the psychological reaction to an internal conflict. And basically what happens, you want to go up to 7 figures, and a part of you so wants to. I mean, is so ready. And there's a part that says, no, don't do that. You're going to be, and you have all the reasons why you shouldn't. And that internal conflict is what causes resistance.
So is the only way to overcome resistance? I know I read it in the book, but you might have to remind me. And of course, everybody go buy the book to get all the context. You just keep putting yourself in the uncomfortable situations and move through it. Or do
No,
you have another? Okay.
no, because what happened if you resist resistance, anything you resist, persists.
Persists.
So resisting
Yes.
resistance is only going to make it worse. The thing to do is have an inquiry with resistance.
Okay.
Work with your resistance to look at why the resistance there. Resistance is always meant, is always your psyche's way of protecting yourself. And then you have to look at, what are you scared of? What will happen if you actually succeed and make your 7 figures? What's the payoff for not making 7 figures? So you ask yourself a series of questions to get under that.
I love that.
And
Speaking of
then
getting under things.
from that awareness of why you need, because nothing is there unless it serves a purpose. Nothing. So once you realize that even if it's still scary, it doesn't serve you, it makes it much easier to act.
I love that. One of the parts in the book where you go much deeper than I've seen other financial experts go is where you talk about reparenting and childhood trauma, and how that childhood trauma really affects our money. So, for those who may not be aware, how does that childhood trauma affect our decisions with money as adults? And then, how do we start that process of reparenting?
So years and years ago, many years ago, I began attracting very high earners. I guess maybe when my book Secrets of Six-Figure Women came out, I started attracting women that were making 7 and 8 figures, high 6 figures, 7. And it was amazing to me, these smart, razor sharp, smart, successful women were, their finances were a mess. And as I started looking into it, I realized that there was some kind of trauma or deep pain or unresolved emotions that they were keeping down, and the financial turmoil became a distraction, so they didn't have to feel the pain. And I remember, in fact, I remember this was even before that, when I gave a course. I forget what the course was, but this woman, one of the women in the course, she got completely out of debt. She was so excited. She had never been out of debt in her whole life. And after the course was over, she was out of debt for about a month. And all of a sudden, she started having these memories of being abused as a child. And she realized that these memories, that the debt and the turmoil around it and the fear around it and the pressure had actually prevented those for her from feeling that. And I think that's why so many people get back into messes once they clear it up, because trauma doesn't need people. When I inquire about trauma, they go, oh, no, everything was great. Everything was great. I didn't have it that bad. Trauma is relative, and trauma has many faces. It's not just being beaten. It's not just being sexually abused. It's not just living in a war zone. It can be things very, very subtle, like seeing a parent ill, or being having your brother bully you. It just, well, that's just the way it is. No, trauma lives in our nervous system. And when anything even remotely similar to a trauma event, or we interpret it as remotely similar, our logical, rational brain immediately shuts down, and we go into some form of fight, flight, or freeze. And so that's why I believe trauma work tends to be a very big part of the work I do with women. And I am not a trauma therapist. And if I can't, I've done work in trauma, but I'll refer them to a trauma therapist. So yeah, it's a big part. And reparenting is when you do the work with your little girl. There, inside each of us is our little child, is that little girl inside of us who has been wounded in many ways. And if anything happens in our world that is anywhere similar to that early wounding, our logical brain shuts down, but she comes into play. She starts taking over. There's this analogy, I did not make it up, but you see it often. It's like you're driving a car. You're just driving a car, and you got you as a little girl in the back seat, all nicely strapped in, and she's playing. And all of a sudden, somebody in a car next to you goes by and starts screaming and yelling at you. And this little girl gets triggered, and she rips off her seatbelt. She jumps in the car. She pushes you to the passenger seat. She takes over the wheel, and she says, I got this. Now, meanwhile, her feet can't touch the floor. She has no idea how to drive, and you're sitting there stunned. And that's what it's like when we're going forward in life, and trauma, something similar to that trauma, comes at us. And so reparenting, in the book, I have a meditation you can do, but it's about going back and healing that inner child in you, telling her that listening to her, because trauma, people who have undergone, you can see I'm passionate about this. I'm probably taking up too much time talking about this.
No, keep going.
Because trauma, people who have suffered trauma, the most important thing in their healing is to feel seen and to feel heard. And that's what your little girl needs. She needs to feel seen, and she needs to feel heard, and she needs to know that you will protect her by making healthy decisions. And that's basically reparenting work.
I want to reiterate that, because recently I was working with someone, and I was the client, and he was talking a lot about neglect, right? And whenever I heard about neglect, I always assumed it was physical neglect, and there was something I was feeling really stuck about in my life and in my business, that I couldn't get to that next level. He's talking about neglect, and I'm here thinking, oh, I mean, I wasn't neglected. I mean, I was taken care of. I was in a great house, like all that kind of stuff. And then he actually did this really cool exercise, because I was like, I haven't been able to make sales in weeks. Like, I'm in a dry spell. Like, suddenly I go through this next like level, and like it all stops, and I'm not used to this. Like, I'm closing multiple 5 figures a week is what I'm used to, and the faucet just shut off when I started going for something bigger. And he did this exercise, and he was like, where do you feel it? And I said, in my throat and in my chest, right? And then he was like, who told you you were wrong growing up? I'm like, oh, I heard it all the time, right?
Wow.
And he was like, you weren't physically neglected, you were emotionally neglected, right? But then something happened when he said that, where he unlocked it, right? And then suddenly I was making more money than ever.
Wow. That's a beautiful example of how you would never imagine that being emotionally neglected or being emotionally dismissed or marginalized or trivialized or put down can actually be a traumatic event for a child who doesn't understand. So it shows
And
you,
I,
yeah,
no, I'm having this moment now where I'm like, holy crap, I do this in my relationships too. Like I'm having this moment right now where like, if I feel like I'm being dismissed, the claws are out.
yeah, that's exactly
It's the
right.
same thing, isn't it?
It's exactly the same. We do not realize, and not enough is said to the general public, how unhealed trauma can affect our money, can affect our work, can affect our relationships, can affect our life.
All right. So, what are 3 things that people can start doing to rewire their brains for wealth? I know you lay out the whole process in the book. So, guys, really seriously, go buy this book. There's great exercises in there to help you get a lot of clarity. And actually, some of the clarity that I got from the book, from one of the exercises, when you were like, I think it was something along the lines of, what was something that happened when you were a child, and what's something that happened when you were an adolescent, right? And around money or your own self-worth, right? And I had never realized until I went through your book that I had 2 distinct moments, one as a child and one as an adolescent, right, that affected my own self-worth. So when I say pick up and do the book and do the exercises, do all the exercises, because this like 30-minute podcast cannot possibly do it all justice. So back to the question, what are 3 things people can do to start rewiring their brains for wealth?
I'll do better. I'll tell you 3 things you can do to actually rewire. This is 3 steps. So
Okay.
it took me years because I wanted to boil it down for my clients and me. This really, everything I write about is what I want to learn. And so what I wanted to rewire my brain. And so I boiled it down 3 steps. It's very simple and takes massive effort. It's very difficult. Rewiring is very difficult at the beginning, but if you understand that and you stick with it, within days, weeks, months, you can really rewire. So the 3 steps I'll tell you, and then I will go into them. The 3 steps are recognize, reframe, and respond differently. So let's say so when I started writing this book, writing, yes, I'm a writer. Writing scares the hell out of me. It is so hard for me. It is, my ego does a real number on me. So while I started writing this book, I just started myself freezing and my voice telling me, you write like shit. You're a terrible writer. You can't do this. You can't do this. And so I thought, I'm going to rewire this. And so first step is recognize the negative thought that you are having that is causing you to do this. The negative thought could be, I'm not enough, or there's never enough, or I don't have what it takes, which was mine. So just recognize it, but recognize it in a certain way. Recognize it not with criticism or judgment, but recognize it with curiosity. Isn't that interesting? And then separate yourself from the thought by saying, I am having a thought about not being enough. I'm having a thought, there's never enough. I am having a thought that I can't handle it, that I can't do this. Just recognize it, separate yourself from it with curiosity. Isn't that interesting? I'm having a thought about, because the thought is not true. It's just energy coming from your mind. It's not true, but but keep thinking it enough and it will become wired in your brain. So recognize the thought. Next, reframe that thought. Reframe means, how can I see this differently? It means looking at it in a different way, because every situation, how we respond is our interpretation of it. So have a different interpretation. And I'm not enough, you can respond with, I'm enough, I'm plenty, or there's never enough, or there's plenty. For me, I don't have what it takes. I responded with, I can handle this. I can handle this. Now, when you reframe, you will not believe it. I can handle this. It's like creating an affirmation that you repeat over and over and over again, because it's the repetition that starts that new neural pathway building and starts weakening the old neural pathway. So you just repeat it over and over again. So recognize with curiosity, reframe with a more positive affirmation, and then respond differently. Respond as if that reframe was true. Respond as if I can handle this. And I just started doing what I didn't want to do. I would write when I didn't want to write. Because one thing about responding differently, you'll know if you're doing it right if it doesn't feel comfortable, if it doesn't feel right, if it feels scary. That means you're responding differently. And so these three together are important. Yeah, you could just respond differently and plow through, like you were talking about plowing through your resistance, but it doesn't work, because then that's like running a marathon without first training for it. It's really hard on you. It's really hard and it's painful. But the reframe reframe and recognize are the mental training to help you respond differently. So it speeds up the whole process.
Yeah, and I want to point out this is like an everyday thing and you're never done doing it. Because I think
That,
sometimes people think there's a mountaintop they get to with this stuff. And I'm like, no. Because then you're gonna go do the next uncomfortable thing and we're not finished growing until we're dead. So it's
yeah, but it can get easier. And like my thoughts, I don't have what it takes. It'll come back. It'll come back.
yeah.
But I know how to rewire it and I can do it very quickly and it's done until it comes
Yes,
back
yes,
again.
yes. Yeah, I
So
mean,
yes,
the one I'm working through now, which may not be, well, I mean, it is financially related in a sense, right? Is like my own leadership skills and now leading a team in a company that I own. Talk about growth edges, right? And learning things that I've never been shown or taught, or where I have a lot of doubt, right? So I'm using the same things you talk about in Rewire for Wealth, right? But I'm using it for that, which indirectly does have to do with the money in my bank account.
oh, but honey, this is not just rewire. Okay, I call it rewire for wealth because it's my genre is money. But you can
Yeah,
rewire anything. You can rewire anything. Absolutely everything can be rewired.
I love that. All right. So, what do you have coming up that the audience needs to know about? I mean, I know you used to do events. I don't know if we're still doing them, where the state of the world. Some places are. I'm in Florida, it's open. But what do you have coming on or coming out that the audience needs to know about?
I think the thing I'm most excited about, it's been a dream of mine for years to create a safe place where women could talk openly about money as women, because we
Mm,
talk very differently than men. And so I have an online community called the Wealth Connection, and it just warms my heart how we talk so openly and candidly about money and the emotions around it and the deeper work around it and the practical stuff. And we have bi-weekly coaching sessions, and we have expert calls, and we have a book club, and we have a master classes, everything to do with money. And so it's called the Wealth Connection, and you can go to my website, which is Barbara-Huson, Barbara-Huson.com, and go to the coaching link and you'll see it on the coaching.
amazing. We'll make sure to link everything in the show notes for you guys. So, final question. Do you have any parting words for the women who listen to this podcast? Many of them are business owners themselves. Many of them are learning how to manage cash. I can tell you from speaking to many of them, they have had trauma, many of them in their past. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for the women in our audience who are like, damn it, like I keep trying this thing and I can't seem to figure out this money thing. What is wrong with me? What would be your words of wisdom to them?
It's not a money thing. Money problems are only symptoms. The problems with money are never about money. It's always something deeper, always. And if you can get, like you did, Amanda, when you found out how your childhood neglect affected you, if you can go deeper, and I will tell you that I am convinced that women's issues with money have to do with their fear or ambivalence about power. And
Mm.
power, power means, my definition of a powerful woman is someone who knows who she is, who knows what she wants, and expresses that in the world unapologetically. So essentially, our fear of power is our fear of becoming all we can be instead of watering ourselves down so we don't make waves. So if you're having money problems, I suggest diving in deeper and look at where you're afraid to be fully who you're meant to be.
Ooh, that was so good. Thank you so much, Barbara, for coming on the podcast and sharing your wisdom with us. Like, this is a dream come true. So, thank you so much for coming on and speaking with our audience.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you.